All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our tax class, specifically understanding property taxes, right? So, with regards to property taxes, this is one of the key things that when people buy real estate, you have to pay that, right? So, what is a tax, right? So, this week we're going to tackle the three taxes that has to do with us as real estate agents, as real estate investors. So, today we're going to talk about property taxes. Tomorrow we're going to talk about the benefits of owning, buying, and selling real estate, which I'll touch on it a little bit later towards the end. I'm sure we'll have time. So just in case you guys have some questions that may arise, or at least prepare you for tomorrow to ask questions, right? And then on Thursday, our most fun class is how to make your life tax deductible, right? More specifically, your real estate life, okay? And then of course that can move towards our personal lives because there are some things that we can do to make things deductible, okay? All right, so let me get started. Equals our thing. All right, so let me share my screen. Quick PowerPoint. Okay. If at any point you guys have questions, right? Um, there's my contact info, right? So just simply, reach out anytime. Okay. Okay. So, mm, okay. You guys should see on your screen, understanding property taxes, right? Okay. Right. So the best way to reach me is always by text. Okay. Do you guys see um understanding property taxes? Okay. Let's see why is that showing there? Okay. So you guys see understanding property taxes? Is it a full screen on your computers, right? So I'm
Yep.
assuming that's
Yes,
okay, great.
yes.
Okay. So there's my contact info. Most of you guys have it already, but if not, 510-475-7500, right? So again, this is meant as a informative. So we'll talk about more specifically Proposition 8, 13, and 19, right? So one of the key things that you guys should know, right, is when our property taxes due, right? So taxes are due typically November 1st, right? And of course, February 1st, right? As you know, the tax year starts July 1st through June 30th, right? So right now we're technically on the second half, right? So taxes were due February 1st, but they don't become delinquent until April the 10th, right? So there's an acronym that I teach. It's called the No Darn Fooling Around with regards to property taxes. So where's that? NDFA. So the first half is due December 1st, excuse me, November 1st, and then delinquent, right? So no darn, right? So again, it's due November 1st, as it says here, delinquent December 10th. The second half, which is where we are, due February 1st, delinquent April 10th. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So again, it's due, it's one thing to be due and then another to be delinquent. You want to avoid the delinquent date because that gives you, or that means you have to pay a 10% penalty and you want to avoid that amount. Okay. So big thing. Now, how are property taxes, determined? Some people ask, like, your clients may ask, hey, how are my property taxes determined, right? So the very first thing is usually it's based on the purchase price. So that's what we call the tax assessed value, right? Sometimes, so if let's say I buy a property that's 20% below value because that you're my friend, right? So, well, the county reserves the right to tax you based on the current market value, right? So if some people says, hey, we're only going to report $1 million and I'll give you $1 million, you know, cash, right? Or some other way. Well, guess what? You may not be saving any money in regards to property taxes, even though your purchase or acquisition cost is below market. Or the county reserves the right. They know how much values are in certain areas. So they're going to assess you at current market value. They do have that right. Okay. And as I said, we're going to talk about Proposition 8, 13, 19 today. Right? So how is it calculated? Well, the very first part is that you will, 1%, everybody gets taxed 1%, local county, right? And then we have the state mandated ones and local special taxes. Now, some of those could be what we call Melrose, right? School bonds. Now, in some cities, garbage fees are included. Now, there will be some things like, sewer assessment, mosquito abatement. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So here's an example, right? The current tax for this property, right, is assessed at $5,600. There's the effect, the amount, the 339, which basically one is for land and one is for the improvement. Now you can see here the land here is 226. It's double than the improvement. Well, what does that tell you? You're probably in an area where land is more valuable because usually it's the opposite. Land should be about a third or up to 40%, less than 50%, and then there's the improvement. Now, in areas like this, probably San Francisco, right, land is more valuable, right? So improvement is less. Okay. So again, or in this case, the land may be, let's say, it's 5 acres, but the property itself is a small 3 bedroom, 2 bath house. So therefore, the improvement, right, the structure is only taxed lower than what the land is. Okay. So here's an example of what kind of assessments that can happen. Right. We have the basic 1%. We talked about that before. And then there's these voter approved stuff. And then, of course, there's these things that are local to the area, to the parcel, typically to the city. Okay. So these are just an example. And you can see on the bottom, garbage fee, right? It's 490 per year. In some cities, you get billed separately. So your property taxes seems lower, right? But if you go to, let's say, some areas like Mountain House, your taxes could be more than 2% as a total, right? Because there are other Melrose or infrastructure assessments that's included in your tax bill. Now, sometimes there's some home improvements that may be part of your tax bill. Okay. We call those hero programs, right? So again, there are different programs that is allowed to be added to your property tax bill rather than a one-time assessment. Okay? Now, if let's say somebody bought a house, right, back in 1980, let's say, and now they're selling it in 2025, the tax bill for someone, who's owned it for a long time, okay, and someone who just moved in, their tax bills could be totally different. Okay. Why? It's because of Proposition 13. Right? We'll touch on that. So what does Proposition 13 say, right? So basically, a property is only reassessed upon change of ownership. Okay, either partial ownership or full ownership. Let's say someone sells their property, right? Now in California, we are the only state that still has this, right? Where our assessment can only go up no more than 2% per year on an aggregate value. Okay, the exception is the Proposition 8, which we'll touch on later. So basically, remember that person who bought it, 1970, right, or 1980, right? Their taxes can only go up 2% per year, even though the value of the home has increased by more than 2% per year. Okay, so we'll let that sink in, right? So Prop 13, just remember it limits the increase to 2% per year, right? So just remember that, right? Now, one question is, as I said earlier, right? Why some people say, "Hey, why am I paying more taxes than my neighbor?" You know, well, because your neighbor moved in or bought the house a lot sooner than you did, right? So here's an example, right? Okay, buyer A, neighbor bought a house, year one for $100,000. By year six, that would have increased by 2% per year, right? So 2% of 100,000 is only 2,000, right? The next year, 2% of 102,000 is another number, right? But see, after 6 years, the market value has gone up to $150,000. So they sell it, right? So a buyer comes in, after 5 years and say, or after 6 years, say, hey, um, my taxes is based on $150,000 because that's the sales price, that's the market value. Well, the neighbor who's owned it, 6 years, who bought it 6 years ago, their taxes is only going to be based on 110,408 because of Prop 13. So on year six, someone's paying based on 150,000, based on the rate, whatever that may be, and the person who owned it, who bought it 6 years ago, their taxes is based on 110,408, even though the house value for both houses is $150,000, right? So here's a quick example, right? If you look at this chart, right? Remember, one neighbor bought it, 6 years ago, is based on 100,000. It goes up 2% per year, up to year six is 110,408. Even though the market value is $150,000, you don't pay $150,000. Now, most states now they're basing their taxes every year on the current market value, right? In some states they limit it to like 5%. So in California, we're limited to just 2% per year. And that's what we call Proposition 13. There's been different ballots that they've been trying to get rid of this, right? Because again, uh, you know, the state can make more money if they base it on what we call market value every single year. But that makes it difficult, right? So in this case, Prop 13, um, it helps the people who have, where their income has not changed. Okay. So hopefully it makes sense. Proposition 8 allows for temporary property reduction. What basically this does is if let's say you bought it, let's say, a couple years ago in 2021, some people bought a house around October. And then by the time next year came along, prices went down 10% in some areas. Well, under Proposition 8, you can apply for a temporary reduction, okay, for that time frame. If some of you guys were in the market, 2007 to 2012, where prices were going down, you could have had a lower tax bill for those years. And then in 2012, when the market caught up, 2013, the county reserves the right to catch back up, okay, to the full schedule. Remember, at the time of when you purchase the property, the county will set a baseline. Okay. That baseline is based on market value, based on sales price. Okay. From that moment on, they're going to create a schedule where it maxes out the 2% per year. If at some point you feel that the market value is lower than what they're assessing you for, you can apply for a temporary reduction under Proposition 8. Okay. So
What is it? What's the years, the span of years that you said that
what's that?
that affected that proposition? What is it?
8?
Proposition 8. Uh-huh.
Depends on the area, but generally speaking, the biggest hit that we've seen is between 2008 to 2012. Most recently, it's around 2010, I mean 2020, 2021, right? Where there was a big increase in the interest rates that what some homes, devalued, right? So here's what you just have to figure out. When I get my tax bill, usually around August, September of the year, what is my assessed value? Is my assessed value lower or higher than the market value? If your assessed value is higher, then you should apply under Proposition 8, a temporary reduction. If your assessment is below the market value, then you probably are getting away with it because you're paying less. You're protected under Prop 13. So just remember that. Okay. So Proposition 13 limits the increase to 2% per year, starting from the time that you bought it. Proposition 8 just gives you a temporary reprieve, a temporary reduction based on the market going down. Most people, right, will never use Proposition 8 unless they bought at a time of its height and then followed by a regression of value. Right? Like I said, biggest time was around 2007, 2008 when we had the mortgage meltdown, so to speak. Right? For instance, we bought a house back in 2005. Right? Market value went up 2006, 2007, no big deal, right? So we got limited 2% per year, even though the market went higher. Well, guess what? In 2009, right, when the market really dropped, we needed I contacted the county and basically showed them the comparables, right? You have to show at least 4 comparables that shows, hey, the market has gone down, and it did. So instead of just, some people were doing short sales, letting their homes go to foreclosure. What we did was we just sat on it and basically got a temporary reduction for like, 3 years from 2008 to 2009 to 2012. And then 2013 came and they brought it all back to its normal schedule. So for 4 years, 3 or 4 years, we had a temporary reduction under Proposition 8. Okay. So again, this is something that whenever we see a reduction in values, usually we tell our agents, hey, let people know about this Proposition 8 and do an analysis for them. What is the market value and what is their tax assessment? And you'll see if the tax assessment is lower or means higher than the market value, then they should qualify under Proposition 8. Okay? Most people, most agents don't even know this, right? So get to know what Proposition 8 is. Okay? So if you are a disabled veteran, right? Just remember this, okay? You can get an exemption or reduction from your assessment, either 100,000 or $150,000, depending on if you are a disabled veteran under low income. If you're a low income disabled veteran, then you can have a reduction up to $150,000. How to apply for that? You have to call the specific counties. Okay. Now you have to be, 100%, disabled veteran. Okay. There's a test that they do. Okay. You get a certificate from VA. Okay. Now, the biggest deduction that we can have as homeowners, right, and we'll touch on this tomorrow also, is to get a $7,000 reduction in assessed value because we own the property and we're living it as our primary residence. Okay, so just remember that. Okay, so if you have a property and you own it or your client is living in it, look at the property tax bill and see if they're taking the $7,000 reduction. Okay. So if you guys have a property that you own now and you want to know if you're taking advantage of it, text me at 510-475-7500 of your address and we can take a look at it together to see if you're taking advantage of it. I would say at least a third, if not up to 50% of the agents that I know that we've done this test are not taking advantage of this, right? Because again, it's a simple checkbox that people would usually have to file when they purchase, okay? Or they can do it within a year of moving in. Okay, so I'll address all your questions shortly. Okay. So remember the last day to apply for this was February 15th. Otherwise, you have to wait till the following year to get it. Okay. One final thing I want to discuss is the California tax, the homestead law. Okay, most people don't really know about this. So just remember, your basic exemption used to be 75,000. Okay, so basically what this means is, if you get sued, right, and they attach your property to try and collect, okay, they cannot leave you homeless. They have to leave you at least $75,000 of your equity. If your equity is less than $75,000, they cannot force you to sell your primary residence. Okay. So again, we'll touch on this on one other class in the future, but just if you just Google California homestead law, right? This is what this is. In Florida, it used to be unlimited, but I think it's like $5 million now. So that's why there are some people that are moving to Florida. So in case they get sued, right? They have a protection. Okay. So know what the California homestead law or what the homestead law is for each state. Each state has a different amount. There's a few states that don't have this at all. At least California has minor protection, but Florida, I believe, has the biggest one. Okay. So just to know that. All right. Okay. So that's my PowerPoint. So I'll include that in some of my other emails later this week. Hopefully, you guys read my emails, right? So let me take a look at the chat real quick and see if I can answer some questions on the chat. Okay. Okay. If you guys have questions, you're welcome to just unmute yourself or raise your hand. Okay. Yes, I'll share the slides. So just look for your email, probably on tomorrow's morning email, including this recording. Okay. Um, okay. Vet disability have to be connected. Yes. So if let's say you're a disabled veteran, right? That exemption. Let's say you are a veteran and you get hurt at another job, then you're not a disabled veteran. Okay. You have to be injured or be disabled during your service. Okay. So good question. So anybody have any specific questions? Bartika, question.
So, is there a limit to the number of years when it comes to Proposition 8?
Proposition 8, no, there is no limit.
Okay.
So when you get your tax assessment around usually around August or September, you get this assessment valuation from the county, and you look at that, and you look at it. It's like, is what they're assessing me for higher
Mm-hmm.
than the market value? If it is, then you can apply for Proposition 8.
As
Okay?
I mean, as many years as possible. I mean, there's no
Yeah, as
limit.
long as it's if the market keeps going down. Let's say Bartika buys a house say for $2 million today,
Right.
right?
Right.
And for the next 5 years, the market keeps going down for whatever reason, right? To where
Okay.
it's less than 2 million. Then
Mm-hmm.
she can apply for a temporary reduction. Come, to 2030, when the market catches up, right? Then she may be taxed at a schedule based on 2 million today and then the 2% maximum per year.
Okay.
So
So
in
then the
some
proposition.
years, like
Okay.
it,
Get it.
yeah, so like in 2012, our tax bill went up like 6%. I'm like, whoa, well, that's
Oh.
because the market went up, right?
Okay.
So they caught back up those temporary reduction. Remember, it's a temporary reduction.
Right. Right.
So
Thank you.
at some point, the county will catch back up. The
Right. Yeah.
limit is 2% per year under Prop 13. Okay.
Okay. So it goes back to Prop 13 as soon as the market rates go up, right? So,
Yes, correct.
right, right. Thank you.
So
Thank
basically, in essence, your tax bill or your tax assessment should go up no more than roughly around 24% per year, every 10 years.
you. Okay.
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 So
Okay.
in
Thank
California, in the Bay Area, some values have doubled, tripled every 10 years,
you. Right.
right? Depending on when you bought it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know some people who bought houses in 2007 to 2010. Market values have like tripled, quadrupled,
Right.
even
Right.
5 times, but their taxes only went up 2% per year. So so you could potentially, like I have a client who bought in Atherton, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
taxes, they bought at the right time. Their
Right.
taxes is nowhere near the market value, right?
Thank
But
goodness.
as we'll learn later on Prop 19. Okay, so we've talked about Proposition 8, Prop 13, 13. We'll talk about Prop 19 shortly.
Mm-hmm.
Ranjoj, question on
Hey Greg,
Proposition
yeah,
19.
I have a question in regards to the homestead law.
Yes.
Is I know you said, of course, depending on the state, they give you a certain amount. Is that tax exemption, or do they, or is that money that you can take out from
No,
equity?
no, it's not a money you can take out. It's your protection from being homeless. Okay. So basically, if someone sues you, let's say you kill someone and or you get into a car accident, right? They sue you for $1 million. If you have less than that, whatever that number is, if you're married or not, if you're a veteran or whatever that protection is, they have to leave you that money or they cannot force you to sell your primary residence. You know, you guys heard of OJ Simpson, right? Okay. So he did this, he moved to Florida. Remember, he was a California resident, but during all of that, he moved to Florida. He moved his assets there, and he was able to, protect. He was living in a multi-million-dollar property. Okay. They couldn't force him to sell it because he didn't have enough equity under that protection. Okay, it's equity. It's not amount. Okay, it's equity. So if he didn't have enough equity up to that amount, like in this case, let's just say 75,000. So if Ranjoj, has a property, it's worth $1 million, but he has a loan amount of 950, and he gets sued for $1 million. They cannot force him to sell his property because he has less than $75,000 equity. Okay. Even though they can say, oh, you have
Got
to
you.
sell it, we'll give you the 50. No, it doesn't matter. There's not enough equity to satisfy, you know, to where he has, Ranjoj has the $75,000 or higher if he's married. Okay. So again, each state is different. Aparna, question? That was good music. Question?
Yeah, I have the same question that Anjali is like, for example, if somebody sue you for $1 million
Yeah.
and your house has a loan of like whatever 400,
Yeah.
whatever it is, so they can still get it 600, or do you, how, I mean,
No, if your equity is above the threshold, they can force you to sell the property and then give you that exemption, that $75,000 or whatever that amount is. Okay. So the goal is to have less equity in
The goal is
California.
to have more loan on you, okay?
Yeah. Again, there are ways to protect yourself, right? You guys can get insurance, right? A blanket insurance, right? So again, there's different ways to protect your assets. So that, or just don't get sued, right? But in California, right, there's a lot of lawsuits, so just be aware of that. So
And
I'm not
one
sure
more
you guys have more questions, Bertika, Ranjoj, or Aprana. If you guys want to lower your hands or ask
I have
away.
one more question for you.
Yes,
On the proposition 8 that you said that
yes,
they lower your amount for that particular number of years
yeah,
that you are requested for because the value goes down of your house. So after 3 years, when for example they come to current year 2025, will the one that they have 3 years back will be the established that as your
yeah.
um,
They'll have a new schedule. So basically, when you buy a property, they have a schedule 2% per year maximum forever, right? Until you sell, right? They have that schedule. It's in the computer, right? When you ask for a temporary reduction, they will reduce that year, but you're still on a schedule. So whenever that schedule meets market value at that year, then that's what you're going to end up paying. Okay. So basically, you'll be paying whatever you're supposed to be paying, except for the years when the market goes down.
Okay, so it will come back,
And
and then
again,
it will come back with a 6% X. For example, 3 exam.
they'll
So what?
catch back. They'll catch back up. Okay. So again, the county reserves the right to charge you an increase of 2% per year. Got it? It's 2% per year, maximum. Okay. Prop 13. If the market value is below your assessment value, you can get a reduction, right? But see, one of our houses we bought back in 1995, I think, right? The market went down in 2007 and 8. But see, the market value was still higher than our assessed value, so we couldn't apply for that temporary reduction. But the house that we bought in '05, we were able to get a temporary reduction because the market value was below the assessed value. Got it? Okay. Whatever your assessed value is, you're still going to pay that based on that schedule, right? The only time you get this temporary reduction if you bought at the wrong time, right? Let's say today, you buy today, right? 2 years from now, the market goes down to the market value that you paid today. You can get a temporary reduction. Okay. So again, just look at your assessed value compared to the market value. And that's how you can tell if you can apply. Okay. All right. So let me talk about Proposition 19. This is the biggest thing, right? Back in 2021, I believe, is when it became law, right? So in okay, you guys on your screen should see Proposition 19, right? So this became effective basically in 2021, April, technically, right? Um, and then the inherited ones went back to February 16th. So the main thing you need to know about Proposition 19, this is for people 55 and over, right? So if you're under 55, one of the owners has to be at least 55 and over, okay? Or with severe disabilities, right? Victims of wildfires. That's what this is for. So if you were in the LA wildfire, you can get this you can qualify under Prop 19. Okay. So you know the qualifications. Now, all this does is you can transfer, let's say, someone has a $2 million property that burnt down in LA. They say, well, I don't want to buy, I don't want to rebuild in LA. I'm going to sell that property and buy in the Bay Area where there's no wildfire, like the coast, like in Half Moon Bay, right? Okay. Well, they can do it up to 3 times in their lifetime. Okay. So they can move from Half Moon Bay back to LA if they wanted to, right? And transfer their assessed value, right? The assessed value of that house in LA. So if someone like I think Tom Hanks has a house or whoever those, people who had properties in LA, they bought it, in the 70s and 80s. Their assessed value is less than the market value of their property. Okay. So they could transfer that assessed value. Now, I don't know what they can sell their property for because it was burnt down now, right? They're only going to be able to sell it for the value of the land unless they rebuild. Now, if those homes were rentals, right? Unless the kids plan to move into their properties, right? They're not going to get any breaks. These are only for people who own the property for 55 and over, right? Or victims of natural disasters. Okay. It's a matter of what we call having your tax assessment, portability, right? You can move it from one property to the other up to 3 times after you're 55. Okay. So I'll include this as part of your slides. Okay. There's some other ones that I'll also share, but so just look for make sure you guys look at your email tomorrow morning. Okay. So pretty simple. Prop 19 is very simple. It's basically if you're 55 and over, you want to move from a higher priced area into a lower priced area, as long as the house that you buy is lower in price and the assessed value is lower than what you buy it for, then you're fine. If you buy higher, then you have to make up that difference. Okay. So if you guys have questions or examples, you guys can just call me. Or best yet, I would tell you to have your clients call the county to give them the exact answer that they're looking for, the county that they're moving into. Okay. So, question, Deborah.
Okay, so Greg, if say for instance, someone lost their home in the fire,
Yeah.
something like you just described with Tom Hanks. Now, if they were to rebuild,
Mhm.
then how does that affect their taxes? Now, are they taxed at the actual cost of the new home?
Nope. Nope.
Pardon me?
It's whatever they were being built at. So let's say Deborah has a $5 million house in Malibu, right? She bought that back in the 70s so she probably bought it for, let's say, probably $100,000. So it's nowhere near the $5 million value today. House burns down, right? Earlier this year, right? In January, February,
Mhm.
right? House burns down. So now the land value is only $1 million, right? Her tax assessment on the whole structure is probably after 50 years is probably going to be somewhere around 100,000 times, probably about $600,000 is what your assessment value is after 50 years, right? Now the house is only, the land's only worth $1 million, right? She's still being taxed based on 650, okay? Even though the house burnt down, right? Now, next year, because the house is not built yet, she can apply for a reduction because now she should only be taxed on the land value because there's no structure. Does it make sense? Right?
Mhm.
All right. Okay. So you have to do the calculation, right? So she should not be taxed on the improved value. Now, next year, or the following year, she builds her $5 million house, or whatever the value, she rebuilds it. Okay. If she rebuilds the same house, then she will only be taxed whatever she was being taxed, valuation wise, at the time the house before it burnt down, right? If she let's say, oh, I want to build a $10 million house now. Well, guess what? That extra $5 million or whatever that valuation that the county says, she has to now pay in addition to what she was being taxed at. Okay, so there's a specific calculation. Okay, so in your case, Deborah, right? Yeah, let's say you build the same house, then you will be upon completion of that house, you'll be taxed at whatever you were being taxed at before. Okay, does that make sense, Deborah? Right, and everybody,
Yes, thank you.
right?
Yes.
Again, you
Mhm.
pay whatever you're supposed to pay, right?
Okay.
Then there's going to be some, temporary reduction. Again, the county will do that math for you. You just have to apply for it. Okay, because
Greg, I have a question. So, for example, I have a client who have a house in, for example, San Ramon.
yeah,
They bought it for like around 600K 10, 12 years back.
Okay.
And now they are planning to upgrade. Basically, they're planning to buy another home.
Yes.
So and they are basically 55 plus, right? So
Yeah.
will they be able to carry forward the property tax
Yes.
from their
As
own?
long as they buy same or lower, right? Within 2 years, same or lower, right? If let's say 600K 10 years ago, right? So
Yeah,
their taxes is probably going to be about 680 this year, right? It's going to be based on because it's 2% per year, right? So if you look at that, that's let's say 10% increase in the past 10 years, right? So their
yeah,
tax bill is probably based on 680. Okay, let's just use that math because it's not 2% from 600, it's 2% compounded, right? So it's probably
yeah.
going to be based. We'll just do the math at 700, make it easy, right? So they bought it for 600. Now their tax assessment is $700,000. 10 years later, from when they bought it, this house has probably tripled in value. Let's say it's now worth 2 million, right? That's probably a normal case. If you bought a
Yeah.
house in San Ramon 10 years ago for 600, I'm pretty sure it's at least 2 million today. Okay. But your taxes is only based on $700,000 because of Prop 13. You guys following that? 2% per year, right? So if let's say if Vikas' client sells it for 2 million this year, as long as they buy 2 million in the same anywhere in California, their tax assessment will be based on $700,000. Now, if they buy a $400,000 house, then they should don't pay based on 700, pay based on 400. Okay, all right. But if they buy at least 700 to $2 million, their assessed value will be based on that amount. Now, if they buy a $3 million house, okay, that extra million difference between 2 and 3 million, the upgrade that they do will be added to the $700,000. Okay. So if let's say they buy the $3 million house, that $3 million house will be taxed at 1.7. Okay. Hopefully you guys follow that. If they bought $2 million or less, it will be based on $700,000. That's Proposition 19. All
Got
right.
it. And Greg, do they have to sell their first house to take advantage of this one?
No, they do not have to buy first. They can sell. Usually, it's they need the equity, right? They sell first, then buy. In that case, they have 2 years. If they're rich, right, and they wanna buy first and then sell, what they have to do is buy first, and they will pay based on that purchase price. Okay. When they sell their old house with the low tax basis, they can then transfer it to the new house within 1 year of the closing of the old house. If they do
Got
it
it.
forward where they sell and buy first, I mean they sell first, then buy, they have 2 years to do it. If you buy first, then you have 1 year to do everything. From the time you buy, you must close and transfer it within a year.
Got it.
Okay?
Got it. Thank
So,
you.
all right. What about those houses that were closed the very day of the fire? Yeah, they still qualify, right? I'm assuming Amal, I'm understanding your question, right? So what about those houses that were closed, closed escrow? Yeah. Again, if this is when you're selling, right, and buying another property. So if they just bought the day and then the fire was that day, right? Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to sell and then buy somewhere else? Or are they just rebuilding? Right? If they're just rebuilding, then they'll probably have a temporary reduction because there's no structure. So they should only pay taxes based on the land value until the structure is rebuilt. So hopefully, Amal, I answered your question. Right? Does anybody have any other questions regarding Prop 8, 13, or 19? Pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Hi,
let
Greg.
me.
So for
Yes,
how long you
Manjeet.
need to take so for the Prop 19, how long you should be living there? Is there any
19 does not say how long you should be living there. As long as it's a primary to primary, there is
okay
no timeline. Okay.
timeline? Okay, got it. Thank you.